Welcome to the PAMU podcast with host Neoliberal Generate. Welcome to Doctors of History. Willkommen to the PAMU podcast. For the glory of the corporation. For the glory of the corporation.
The computer technology
Willkommen to the PAMU podcast.
has been moving in a way that nothing else people have ever known.
Interconnect each of the computers with the wideband circuit's final destination.
All over the world.
Hello and welcome to the
computer
12th
technology
episode of the PAMU podcast. This time we have the wonderful Eliot Rosenstock with us. How's it going, Eliot?
It's going good. Good to see you, the Zoomer crew, although you're not all Zoomers.
Yeah.
I still think of PAMU is the Zoomer crew, even though it's like probably half Zoomers, half Millennials.
Nah, I think most of us are Zoomers actually.
Millennial Zoomer. Oh yeah, maybe in the group. I don't know.
Today it's me, Vlad, and Nestor is joining us today. Fortunately, he has no video, so you can't see his pretty face.
Yeah.
What's up, Nestor?
What's up? Not much. Just hanging out here.
I mean,
in place of
we're talking, but we
unfortunately.
like back and forth online so much. It almost seems like just like a continuation, like nothing special.
Yeah.
It's like here we go again.
Azim really wanted to join us today, but he's been having some trouble. So
I've been talking with him for before PAMU started. I forget how I started talking with him, but I know he's always been around.
Yeah,
and then started and all you guys.
He had a question for you. You tweeted something about hold on. You tweeted something about what was it? It was like the Epicureans. Oh, hold on. Let's be honest. Yeah. It's still Epicureans versus Stoics in terms of personal friendships.
It is.
Even if the political divide makes us think differently, although opposing Stoics are less likely to associate, surely. So, could you elaborate on that?
The Epicurean philosophy, you might even call it, I think we're circling Epicureans on all of us, and we don't really realize it to just exactly the extent of it, which would sort of shock you, I think. Epicurean philosophy is the, ontologically predicted atoms, right?
Yeah.
Ontologically predicted atoms. So they're on to something. And also it's an atheistic philosophy. So I think what PAMU sort of approaches with its sort of full sophistry, I don't think it's necessarily a nihilism I think it's a response to the Epicurean idea that things form and then they fall apart and thus have this sort of temporariness, or that sort of inscribes them with a lack of meaning that we're sort of fearful of. And I think the way we respond as people who are genuinely trying to figure out the best way to go through life, or the most accurate approach to the universe, and that's also Epicurean idea, which is if you understand the universe accurately, you will have a better life, right? So it sort of starts with ontology and goes to psychology. So the Epicurean idea is that you ontologically need to get some questions right in order to psychologically live in an ideal sort of manner. So the quote unquote sophistry of PAMU, obviously, I don't think you take philosophy lightly, but you're circling the Epicurean idea, which is that there is this sort of things fall apart to everything, and thus it is sort of a bit of a joke. Or at least, but that means it's not quite Dionysian. It is more towards Dionysian side than the Stoics, and then the Stoics are like balance, and then the golden, I guess, to some extent, follow the idea of the golden mean, the Aristotelian idea, but we're definitely not Stoics. Like Sadler, we appreciate Sadler, but we can tell that we are not Sadler, right? There's something fundamentally different between the way that we are talking with each other and the way Sadler talks about things. Sadler is, he wouldn't say he's a Stoic, but he sort of falls towards the Stoic camp, and we fall towards the Epicurean camp. And I think maybe Song, maybe fall, what is it, philosopher meme? He's more on the Stoic side. And I think a lot of people on the further left, they sort of are Stoic about their Dionysianism in terms of their, it's a punitive sort of a Stoic read of those sort of ideas, and this sort of idea that there's objective sort of things that maintain, whereas Epicureanism is sort of ontologically tied to the things fall apart model,
right?
And the pleasure seeking and the good life through this sort of utilitarian effort, which is like there's happiness points. For all the calculator memes, that's sort of where egoism, Epicureanism, they sort of come together in this utilitarian happiness, living well psychology that they're sort of parsing out through ontology. So we're trying to get the ontology right so we can get the psychology right. And that's a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing. I think we're mining the true object of maybe philosophy for us is this sort of dialectic that I think empiricists and Stoics aren't mining. So
right.
Yeah.
Do you think like that has something to do with academic collegiality, that you would be more like prone for like an Epicurean mindset? Just getting compartmentalized by like academia, because I know most of us here aren't really in debt to academia in a sense.
Yeah, we don't need.
Well, wait, just like.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, obviously we're not academics, but like, do you mean also opposed to academia, or?
No, I know you're not opposed to academia. I'm saying that you clearly don't have this this need of this collegiality that they all seek, in a sense. Your discourse is quite different to that.
Well, it doesn't need to fit into the machinery of academia. So to be successful, you need to touch down, just like you're turning a gear. Say if you need 10 points to turn a gear of academia, in order for it to be successful, you're going to want to cover all 10 points to turn and progress. If you don't have to do that, then you're going to, Epicureanism doesn't really fit into that, because it is this sort of dialectical model rather than this empirical model of working on the problem of why, critique for critique's sake,
right.
Which you sort of have to start with critique for critique's sake. And it leads to stupid places. I really just hate the tone of Tim Morton and all those people that sort of write like him. It's just wicked annoying.
Oh man! Well,
Tim Morton doesn't be Tim Morton gives some he said has some insights, that's for sure. But I just hate his tone. And there's so many academics like him. Also Jody Dean as well. I don't hate Jody Dean, but it's just it's this quite aggravating tone for Stoic academia that I think is detrimental to, I would say, the Epicurean project proper, or you could even say the other side of it, which is the dialectical, ontological, psychological dialectic side. And that's what I'm trying to do with the egoism book, which is trying to get the ontology of the psyche right. So to continue that, what exactly are the dialectics at play, right?
So you're writing an egoism book. I
am writing a zero book.
Nice.
Zero book TM.
I've recently read your Zizek in the Clinic.
This new one will be better.
Oh, is it like a new edition or something?
No.
Oh, you mean the egoist one?
The egoism book's gonna be better. But what do you think of the Zizek book?
Well, I really like the idea. I mean, I'm always for especially the fact that the patient themselves needs to have some kind of foundation of how to get into the session with the therapist. I like that idea. I'm clearly not very fucking qualified talking about it. I just like your like the tone that you take here is like very familiar because I write stuff sometimes and then I have this like sparks where I just can't help myself but like be either like edgy or ironic, or in a sense like I was just reading through like this very serious statement on like Lacan and suddenly you just have like a random Nick Land quote where it doesn't seem like there is a reason for it. So
there was I mean, the specific one is, it wasn't a Nick Land quote. It was like me using his sentence structure in order to like get across and then I had to cite it.
Yeah.
And then I actually had a conversation with the editor about how do you, when you're sort of memeing, using the meme, right? So that was a question, because it was like something arrives from the neo-brief therapy arrives from the future, and then there's a big conversation about how to properly like cite that.
So that was like the tone that I really like, found familiar and interesting. It kind of like goes to this question that like I wanted to ask you about, like, which I guess relates back to the whole Epicureanism versus sophistry thing. Just like in like the modern like political landscape, like how do you look at the dichotomy between like sincerity and like irony, and like how do you use both of them? Do you use one of them?
Well, the Zizekian lesson is irony carries the message, whether or not you're pro or against it, right? So, and irony could be key to the things functioning. Or for instance, like if you're talking to like a woman and you're like, and you're interested in her, and then, it's sort of like sex becomes an ironic subject, even though it might not be an ironic subject if then, you do end up, engaging sexually. In the same way, that's why I'm always suspicious of irony. It's like, it's just a joke. It's like, who are you talking to? I'm like, I wrote the Zizek therapy book. But so I'm always wary of irony conveying this message with pseudo disavowal.
Right.
But at the same time,
that's why I like post irony, actually.
Yeah.
Could you?
Because like you can use sort of the structure of ironic comedy, but actually be serious about it. I don't know. It's like, I don't know if you are familiar. Probably you are familiar with what's the name of this page? Dark Shell Gaming.
I think not actually. What is it?
Oh man.
Well,
isn't that the guy that murdered that like Instagram or the Snapchat premium girl?
Oh no, I don't think so. Like, so Dark Cell Gaming is just basically, I mean, it falls very much in the
incel, like dark cell, like dark incel. Okay.
Yeah, but like they fall very much in the category of post law, basically, because it sort of feels so hyperbolic that you say like this can't be serious, right? But at the same time, it's like they're just like being so like extra and hyperbolic to make it look like it's ironic, but like underneath all of that, they're actually kind of believing what they're saying. So
I think they're like, say maybe they're frustrated with women, so then they go way off the deep end in the misogyny sort of free association. They're like, well, I don't believe this, but there ultimately is this, despite them not believing it, it's sort of the origin is like a frustration.
Yeah. No, but
I think men in general, whether or not they're incels, relate to sort of incel discourse, because the male sort of sexual position is the pursuit and hope of you either are successful or you're not successful, like with a particular relation. So I think men are more familiar with the mood of the sort of resentful mood. I think that even you see, people like Crumps talk about on Twitter, and Crumps is like happily married, but he loves the incel discourse, and I think men just sort of relate to the incel discourse in general, or find it there's a sort of catharsis to it.
Wait, you mean
That's why it carries. That's why it's so successful. Obviously,
you mean just all men in general, right? Not just
no.
like
I mean, certain people will be like,
Yeah,
"That's terrible. That's terrible." I'm like, "Yes." I've never thought that's terrible. I've always thought like, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
I think my reactions just sort of like I just sort of stare. Like I see like when you see like Eliot Roger talk, you see his like sort of videos. It's just sort of like.
Oh,
Shit.
like the famous one where he says like he's the supreme gentleman and
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
I
so
don't think I've actually watched it. I mean, by this point, I know what he says because of the meme basically, but I don't think I've ever actually watched the thing.
See, me and my friend Sean, we actually we would play Smash Bros. And then when that actually happened, we listened to his manifesto on audiobook while we played Smash Bros. We just sort of laughed at it. It was a good time. We were like, "Oh shit, this dude's fucked up."
Do you mean catharsis in the sense that it's like something is said in the that is left unsaid usually, or what do you mean?
Not necessarily, just the jouissance of the word in general. Like Lacan's, like the forbidden word. There's a forbidden sentence structure, right? A forbidden S2, you could look at it. Like the Eliot Roger string of logic is like a forbidden logic, right? It's not necessarily in your self-interest either. It probably promotes disharmony and anger and stuff, but it also is forbidden logic in the sense of you're creating these sort of incel ideas, right? And then he actually committed like a murderous act. So it's kind of there's something when there's something forbidden or repressed societally, not even necessarily I initially had this idea and I'm repressing it, but just like it's forbidden, ergo its immediate emergence is that of a repressed thing. So then it's like it actually you're totally psyoped by it. In fact, I would say incel discourse is like very psychologically sound to reproduce itself because it immediately comes up as a repressed thing, and thus its cathartic dialectic movement is to reveal itself, and then the way it reveals itself, and then people react to that by, oh, these incels or whatever, or you could react to it by listening to it while you play Smash Bros. See, that's what people. That's why Stoicism doesn't really work. Rationality kind of fails. Ultimately, the dialectics are extremely irrational, and if your basis isn't living well, like in a utilitarian sort of sense, it's very amorphous. That's the problem with it. Is people want things to fit very nicely together, with logic, but it doesn't. There's a logic to it, but people just are not woke enough. Like us, for instance, we're extremely woke, extremely out, and we're ready to hear it. But most people aren't. Most of the normies, am I right?
Fucking normies, man. Yeah.
No, but really, they simply are not prepared to contend with the most efficient approach to these things. Might not necessarily be there. Oh, that's awful, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that, like, from a memetic standpoint, that like the more a thing is like amorphous, the more reproducible it is, and more like it spreads around faster?
Well, it can't just be amorphous. It has to be particular. It has to call to a particular idea.
Right, but it has to like an amorphous quality to it, so it can't be modifiable enough to be reproduced by
Maybe, but it has to be consistent enough to be a thing that is reproduced, right?
Yeah.
So you might be right to some extent, but it also has to have a consistency, so you recognize it as the same thing that's being reproduced, right?
Right. Yeah. Huh.
That's why no matter what I do, for instance, it's held together by me. Like Lacan's like idea that the person is fragmented, yes, but also I can embody the signifier, so I could do a bunch of different things, but ultimately they come together through the ego or through the one, right? So it's like it is ultimately an ego and its sort of state, hyperstate, which is all the things and how they dialectically relate to each other, and how they relate to each other in this sort of psychological ego. Which kind of sounds dull, but it's like it's sort of the basis of the ontology of like being, I would say. Like, I think, yeah.
I think we, Nestor. I'm really sorry. Nestor doesn't really like ontology that much. He doesn't.
Well, I mean, like, I just, I mostly joke about it.
Well, maybe you don't like ontology because it
of...
seems like it's not the ontology of what matters, which is being, right? Ontology of objects. It seems irrelevant. I'm with you there, but I think there's an ontology of being to some extent that you might be more interested in than, say, like Triple O.
Right.
Well, no, but so here's the thing. Like my take on it is, I don't know if you've read Quine's On What There Is.
No, I haven't.
Well, yeah. So see, this is the problem with like almost always being the only analytic in the room.
By your analytic verb, right? That's your analytic verb.
Yeah, but so it's basically it kind of discusses sort of like ontology in general, and obviously he discusses kind of things like when philosophers talk about like, well, there is such a thing as like unicorns, but it's just like an unactualized potential or something like that, like because you can think about it.
Symbolic whole, yeah.
Yeah, and then well, but the thing is like because you can think about it and you have the concept of a unicorn, it means it has being.
That's but I don't. Yeah, that is kind of annoying.
But like Quine says in the end is like pretty much everything like that is just like bullshit. Like there's no unicorns, there's no numbers, there's pretty much nothing. Like I mean,
I got into this vicious argument with the professor that 3 trees were actually 3 trees, that they had threeness. When I was in undergrad, he like insisted that I learned that objectively 3 is like spook or whatever, and I was like, the 3 trees they contain threeness. They are actually 3 trees.
This is basically ontology, Nestor. It's just you add a ness to like every like object.
Yeah. So that's the thing, right?
Are we threeness right here?
It's not like I don't think you can do ontology. I just think it's like there's not much there. I mean, like, yeah, there are things, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm very much pro desert ontology. Like, pretty much most things you can name and think about don't actually have being.
That's what I'm saying is like, but I'm not talking about that. I'm trying to fundamental. I'm like on your side, right? I'm trying to like what matters, right? What has being? I'm not interested in pretending that inanimate objects have being or that symbolic wholes like unicorns have being.
Yeah.
If you make a unicorn, it will have being. It will have subjectivity.
Right.
There's a process in the real, and I'm not really. I think I'm with you. I'm not with the animation of, say, like the mesh, like Morton's mesh, or objects in general, inanimate objects as real. It's like fuck it.
No, actually,
fuck all.
When you brought up Timothy Morton, I got kind of triggered because I mean, like.
People like
both
him.
Me and Vlad.
I think I'm the only person who really doesn't like Tim Morton. I just don't like the way I don't like.
I don't like Timothy Morton.
I don't like what he said about like Mark Fisher in general. So I think that's why it initially got me on his case, which is he said Mark Fisher he wouldn't have been like me if he just took his meds. I'm like, first of all, that's not even true. It's like a dick thing to say, and it's edgy, but it's like not even true.
That was Tim Norton. I thought I thought that was the Graham Harman.
No, that was Tim Morton.
So
fuck.
Graham Harman is very pleasant.
They're both object-oriented ontologists, right? So
Yeah, they're both Triple O people.
Oh, that explains a lot.
Morton's and Harman's like very like Midwestern polite. Yeah.
Because you hate Tim Morton because of that shit that you said about Mark Fisher.
I just don't like everything about
I have the same.
He rubs me the wrong way.
I have the same thing with Graham Harman because I thought he he was the one that talked about Mark Fisher.
No, that was Tim Morton.
Wow.
But object-oriented ontology in
everything
general
is falling apart.
Oh my god. That's why
shit.
you've been all on the anti-Harman flat ontology train.
I am. I was
Oh,
at least.
bro.
I thought I read that like tweet, and then I read his book, and I was like, well, this is just fucking bullshit, because he said shit about Mark Fisher or whatever. Fuck. Everything is collapsing.
Morton. Like I said, Harman's very pleasant and very, very well socialized. I'd say more so than any of us. So.
Shit.
Probably. I mean, yeah. But the thing is, in the end, object-oriented ontology is just bad.
Well, the idea is bad in terms of it's based off of this project built on another project of anti-anthropomorphism.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's just like there's a clear agenda there. Like with this.
I don't think it's the proper way to approach the real or object processes through anti-anthropomorphism. I think ultimately things relate to mankind, and I'm not really interested in the masochistic, or not even masochistic, just the suicidal sort of like let's try to get rid of the fundamental building block of our. There's always the question in philosophy: where do you start? Do you start with epistemology? Do you start with ontology? But I don't think you start by pretending that you don't exist. Essentially, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or trying to work out problems with objects relating to each other. I think there's science, right? There's science and science working out natural law, but I think you're extremely limited if you have a specifically anti-anthropomorphic sort of view of things.
Right.
Since that is your camera, it's like I'm taking pictures, but I'm anti-camera actually.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. That's interesting. That sounds strange.
Like, to me, it seemed like all like the reason why I like ontology more is because it has like this warning to it that it's basically you should be wary of the dichotomy between the actual and the virtual. Like, they're way more codependent than like it seems.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's
the reality of the virtual. That's Zizek's big new point.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I would say things have a tendency to fall apart easier. Like things have more things holding it together than other things. I would say like my personal life is held together more stringently than my Facebook, for instance, which I just lost access to, but I just regained recently. I was like, shit, I just lost a lot of things actually. But oh well. I was like, oh, that's all gone, and I'm like would have to go and beg for re-adminship in each thing. I was just like, I don't know if I don't know if they're down. Like they might be, but ultimately the idea comes that you could just be like, I could just not re-admin it.
Did you get sucked?
No, I lost my phone. I put it down at a Barnes and Noble, and there was like a few people there, and I like got up and I like came back. Well, it was gone. No cameras or anything. So and they required me to have, just like they required you to have 2-factor authentication. The machine to authenticate was on the phone, so I didn't. So I was just like totally boned. But I just logged in on my computer actually, and I was able to. They let me log in on the computer because it recognized the device from before, and then it let me log in on my phone, and I was like, okay, I got my account back. But for instance, the only thing holding my internet life together, or at least my like access to like put content out, is that profile. And then I realized that the profile token is not myself in terms of like, oh shit, I lost the Eliot Rosenstock profile token, which is possible to do actually. And then I lose access to a lot of things, which that's connected to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, feels like a fucking domino effect of identity loss.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I felt like once I got it back and I was reintegrated into my meme sphere, my regular meme sphere, I realized just how like easily once you can sort of remove yourself from your symbolic order that you've sort of cultivated algorithmically through your phone in dialectic with your sort of day-to-day life. And if you take away the phone part of it, and just go to the day-to-day life, you get this sort of different effect, I would say, to some degree. I think people might say that's too overly online, but I don't think it's incorrect, actually. I think there is, in fact, this dialectic between your virtual profile self and your real self, and I think it's enjoyable. Actually, I like it quite a bit, actually.
Really? I've never heard of that.
That's my Peterson-esque stand. Well, I'm just saying it. I'm only saying it because it's true. I don't know if someone else said it, but I think it's true.
I always just heard that it's just like, oh, there's this like two selves, and like one of them is virtual, so it's bad and stuff.
stupid.
But I never heard that you actually enjoy the dialectic.
Yeah, between your virtual self, because I think I grew up unlike the Zoomers without social media.
Right.
I don't think it was significantly better, and I think it's primed for people that say are more cognitive, or you could even say like if you would someone who wasn't Eliot Rosenstock, the token like higher IQ, you can even say no, really though, because the more complex the game, I honestly here's something I'll stand by this. The more complex the game, the more it favors people with a higher ability to play the game, and if IQ is a factor for game skill, then if social stuff becomes more complex, it further benefits smarter people. So I honestly think Facebook in the sort of virtual world against sort of the traditional world is sort of doing this opposite Nick Land effect, which is it's actually selecting for IQ and for cognitive approaches to the social sphere in a way that we've never seen before. Because it's been given this sort of legitimacy, this ability to navigate algorithms, and that's what we're doing: navigating algorithms, various algorithms.
So you're saying like in terms of like processing power, right? But like, does experience have a role to play in that?
Yeah, it does. I would also say temperament, and I would say because Facebook is so automatic, like. Which people would call like degenerately so. It primes a sort of, I would say, Epicurean. It favors Epicurean sort of style of flowy sort of discourse. It's like what feels utilitarianly the best next, which can be recaptured, of course, and pushed into directions. But I think the thing that draws you to me, and I think me to your guys' discourse as like valid, sort of imminently valid, as is this sort of like. You can see that the desires and drives and will of like whatever you want out of philosophy is best fitted with this versus say like a more punitive left book or like a fash book or like just analytic discourse in general, like university style philosophy, right?
Right.
So there's something that it's just immediate to it. I mean, Zizek would argue that it's not actually immediate, that it's sort of primed, but I think it's success. For instance, if it didn't do that, I would say it wouldn't be as successful.
But
and it goes back to egoism, interest. Okay,
right.
Go on.
But you sometimes you have sometimes shown your disdain for our neolib antics. Is that part of the flow, or is that like sincere?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, no, but I think it flows well. I don't hate you.
Well, you know that's good to hear.
Yeah, no, I don't. No, I like the PAMU. Like I do like the PAMU. I think I would say, like I said, I almost think things are often a high IQ psyop. So it's like if I had a neoliberal boss that could talk philosophy and like had like an exact reason for what they're doing, I'm gonna fight you, and be like, good, I'll try it. I'll be like, wow, what a great place to work. I'm gonna try it. Like for instance, I had an Ayn Rand boss. He was really into Ayn Rand, and I was talking to him about objectivism and capitalism, and the idea that capitalism is a discourse that's intrinsically negative. Like Nick Land says, it's the most unpopular thing, but it keeps happening. Like if you Google capitalism, you'll just get in like Google image search, it'll just be negative views of capitalism. Right. But it's like it's interesting that doesn't matter for finance. So it's sort of in terms of to understand the register that we're in with discourse. See how popular capitalism is in the discourse. It's not very popular and very uncool but it keeps happening. And I think one has to sort of reckon with the process of capitalism in order to fight it in any sort of significant sense. And the way you fight it is really, in America, is really with unions. So you guys have a union.
Allegedly.
But I'm more of an anarchist. I really, the Communist Project is interesting, but ultimately I think it's the least important thing unless the revolution is like, knock, 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 like on the door. I don't think it is. I think what's important is unionizing and then going forth as this union to carry an idea or a process that you're advocating for and to crush your opponent, essentially, or bring them into the fold is ultimately what we're trying to do. The people who who don't like me or who don't like you, or just maybe they've sort of cooled off a bit, but in its heat, I think we Epicureanly are more process driven, and I think that's why our sort of movement has sort of crushed this other sort of approach to leftism on just Philbook, for instance, which is the highly critical, more Maoist type of leftism, has really been thoroughly crushed, and I think it's purely for utilitarian reasons. It's just like the enjoyment factor of what we're doing is higher than what they're doing, so we've crushed them essentially, and that's not that's not. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's how a union sort of works. You're the Anti-Marginalisation Union. I'm me, but and it's not like we have an official union, but we sort of have an official or unofficial sort of temperature, sort of approach to things,
right?
Or value set.
So in your union of hyper woke egoists, you wouldn't be against the idea of utilizing some of the tools of neoliberalism, right? You wouldn't be allergic to that.
Tools? Which tools?
Well, in terms of how do I put this? Well, like a horizontalist doctrine of how a meme reproduces in other people's mind, even if it's morally negative or stuff like that, a hint of subversion, if you would say. So you wouldn't be allergic.
I'm more than a hint of subversion. I'm subversion through and through, and I keep telling people, I'm like, listen, I'm working in my self-interest, but I'm not I think I'm not psychopathic, which is I think really helps me. I think that's why I also like egoism, and I don't feel bad about saying, because I don't like, I like when people utilitarianly flourish, emotionally. I like that. So I think that helps me. Because there are psychopaths, and then the question is, what would you say to a psychopath? And I would say you're still, it's well, you're talking the context I would be talking to a psychopath about philosophy or therapy is usually going to be in my capacity as a therapist, in which case they're sort of already on the register. It's do you want better things in your life? And then you have to sort of go through a different process, but it's still self-interest based. But so I think that is the real problem of egoism in general, is the moral quandary. But I honestly think Epicureans try to disavow it. Traditionally, they're well, actually, it's not about giving people a blank check. But I really say it is about giving people a blank check to do sort of whatever they want, no matter how terrible. And society's job is to figure it out, because people should initially have this blank check of just existence, with material conditions which shape them and form them, and ideology goes through them. But ultimately, I'm pro blank check.
I like that idea. I actually really like that idea, because what really happened, I mean, I don't want to talk about PAMU too much, but what really happened with PAMU and neoliberalism is just at first it started off as a meme that is basically a coping mechanism with living under neoliberalism, just being crushed from it every day, and eventually it became this completely vacuous ideology that you can just stick anything inside, and then once they're in the group we can figure stuff out. I like
Yeah.
afterwards. You know.
Well, let me give you a pro tip that'll help you in your life. Are you ready? Both of you, because this is when it's going to be really relevant. When you're working and you're in the top-down structure of management, you really have a choice. Your choice is align with management and a neoliberal proper, and essentially crush discontent and be very positive and be like party-based, like your manager is a party, you can almost say, and then you're going to help the company, for the company. I love that intro. I love your guys' podcast intro. Very good.
Oh,
And but really it's for the company, or you're not. And I'm not. So like I'm telling you from the other side of the fence. Like if you really are pro neoliberalism, you're really going to have to embrace that top-down structure.
Right.
I would say the way you could do that successfully is being positive and not step on unionizers, but that would totally crush any union effort, really, unless you have a real discontent like myself, who's like who's very, very educated about unions and things like that. But typically, that's where it's going to become relevant to you, which is how are you going to relate to the corporation in your day-to-day life. And the problem is the obedience choice dialectic. So the more choice you have, is generally, I feel like if you're like smart and your ego is sort of self-utilitarian, you want a lot of choice. And the neoliberal top-down model is obedience over choice. So you're obedient. And a lot of times you'll find that your obedience, it might pay off, it might not, but also in your day-to-day life, it might be more painful, it might be more stagnating, utilitarianly lower your happiness level. You might end up working overtime. You might not. That's a pitch for a union, but you might not. I can tell that my unionization effort, I think, has been, even though we didn't get the union in, we have a union of people. Then the CEO stole he said he didn't steal my idea, but they literally are verbatim using the thing I pitched to them, which is having a workers' council within the company rather than an outside union, because we weren't successful. And in getting we needed 70% of people to sign off on it before we could vote. And we had about like 40%. And you have to publicly sign off. So people would have done it if they're anonymous, but they're not anonymous. Your like name gets put up. So they're like, I don't want it to be retaliated against. But we have a union crew. We have this workers' council. And the CEO like fucking doesn't like me. I would say the boss doesn't like me necessarily. But I like, when I talk to the CEO, I like look him in the face. He says, "Come close." I'm like, "All right, is this too close? Are we good?" He's like, "Right." And I like, if he's like, "Oh, I really want to hear from the workers for 40 minutes," and people are complaining to me before, and they're scared of him. But ultimately, my thought is like, you're just a person. I'm not fucking scared of you. You fire me if you want, So he's sitting there and he tries to shush me, and I can like stare at okay. How'd you like my face like sort of just? I'm listening. I'm just listening intently. Kind of unnerving.
What a fucking power play, dude.
But like, I'm not scared of. And I think you might find that unionizing, and my pitch against neoliberalism is that is more satisfying in order to promote. If workers have a problem, they can discuss it, because you'll find that neoliberalism means you don't discuss problems, you paint over problems.
Yeah.
That can be depending on the problems, that can go very bad. So that's my pitch to you guys about the choice you have to make in the future, which is the top-down versus you could say bottom-up model. I'm not for bottom-up. I like to read Moldbug. He's interesting. I read all that shit, all that monarchy shit. It's fun to read. Like, it's like kind of an interesting idea. But that is the choice you have to make. And I don't think monarchy in practice is very fun, honestly, because you're hit with the real of obedience. Obey. We don't know. Philosophers don't. They're not into that typically. That's why they're into philosophy. They want to figure out what's really happening. Right.
Wait. So you're talking like isn't like Cernicek pro having more of a like a verticalist approach rather than horizontal?
Yeah.
Right.
But well, yeah, who's in charge of the party, right? Then that's when you have a verticalist party, when you have like a leftist party. I would say I'm more of that too. You'll be struck by how useless you are in that sort of situation when you are like for instance, I enter the DSA LA proper. I can start a caucus or I can get involved with electoral stuff, but one of the things I think I'm struck by is just how many people are involved in democracy. when you're just when you're just there, you're like, wow, what can I fucking do? Can I do much? And it's kind of interesting. I'm trying to figure out how to like to add DSA LA to my hyper state of what I think is good in the world. So I have my internet psyops, but I'd really like to also I'd really like to be part of DSA LA. And they said they'd help me with if I needed their backup for any union stuff or publicity. One guy who's part of it, who's like an old, said they'd back me up. So that's cool. That's a nice sort of bat behind you. It's like, oh, you know, AOC. Of course, it's not really AOC, but it's the spook. You're sort of wielding spooks and logos, right? It's yeah. I would say the left Excel side is good. The union side is more pro flourishing. Your general person. I would say if I like owned a country, like maybe I wouldn't be as inclined, I don't know, to listen to leftist arguments, maybe. Like, for instance, if I was born in 1820 and I was, like, the king of Prussia, I'd be less inclined to, like, listen to Marx, right?
Right.
It's possible. I don't know. I might have listened to him. I honestly don't know, just because it's... But he was into, like, Hegel and absolutism. But we're not the kings of Prussia. We're really not. Like, we're not. And you'll find that if you want to be, you know, happy, you want to be free, you want to enjoy life, the leftist side, or the side of unionizing rather, as long as it's not that stoic bent of, you know, what's the proper this, what's the proper that, which is, you need to pay heed to, but that's not where the joy comes from.
Right.
Joy comes from these other processes of power. You're accumulating power in order to go through the world. And that's what leftism is about, is power to the people, and I say power to you through the people, through the union.
So what do you think the relationship between left Excel and, like, you know, the unionists should be?
I think that right now they support them, but you know, I'll write the book on it, and we'll see if people listen to it. I'm not exactly liked by the Excelsior, except maybe Nick Nan would never cop to liking me, but I mean, but certainly Urbanomic doesn't. And then I don't know, Urbanomic guy got all mad at me because I tried to reverse his, like, Eliot is the worst person to talk about accelerationism with, and I said, come see what the worst person to talk about acceleration has to say. And they got super mad. They're like, why are you being so weird? I was like, first of all, that's a totally, like, unwarranted response, and you're an annoying little punk if that's how you talk to anybody, and you're a reaction. That was when I was talking with Xeno Gothic, and he's like, why are you being so weird? I was like, I'm just turning your bullshit around. like you weird reactionary. I don't like the British scene when it becomes like weird kind of petty reactionaries. That's what I don't like about the Urbanomic sort of crew. I think it tends towards that. So yeah, what should unions be in relation to accelerationism?
Yeah.
I think my idea is, like, it should be a sterner union. I think you really have to reckon with self-interest. I think capitalism still has that in its pocket. And I'm really trying to say your self-interest is not the right. It's not. And people don't get it. They're like, oh, my monetary self-interest. It's like, no, not even your, I would say maybe, but I would say your general welfare is not neoliberalism, and it's not right-wing politics. That's my simple pitch. And I think accelerationism needs to run with that. And I think left accelerationism and its anti-humanism, it's a very specific kind of anti-humanism, which is disavowal of the signifier of what is human, but not anti-human in that you're not trying to make a better life for people, because that's ultimately what the project of left accelerationism is about. So you'd have a core contradiction calling it sort of anti-human. It's anti-humanism, the signifier. So, and I think unionizing in the history of the left is part of that, and I think acceleration is part of that. Like I tried to do with I think reactionaries ultimately fail because they're just so annoying, and they're so monolithic, and they're like if you're trying to promote traditional values or whatever, and it's just stagnant, and you're just kind of like petty. It's like, and that's your end game. That's your end game. It's like you're protecting nothing with nothing to get for nothing. It's like
yeah.
I really
yeah.
I really like the idea of like subverting individualism in that sense. I can't believe I'm having the same exact like kind of brain moment I had with like Justin Murphy when he fucking talked about like the false Tower of Babel being neoliberalism. Yeah, I never thought that this fucking podcast is gonna bring me these fucking moments.
Yeah.
Like real, because I'm writing like I'm writing a kind of essay right now about how like pandemic memes in a sense.
Yeah.
And I was looking, I was looking at like neoliberalism, and I was considering how it has the upper hand in the sense that it's no longer like all values ascribed to equality. Instead it's ascribed to an abstract quantity, which definitely has an advantage over like previous systems. So I was considering.
It's a very quick system. Like you inject cash into places with cash flow problems. You just inject. Right. So it's a simple mechanism. So it's very efficient and ideologically.
Yeah.
Compared to like communism or anything, which requires thought.
That's exactly what I was thinking. So like it has this obvious advantage.
Yeah.
Right. Just by it being an abstract quantity. So what would be like the next possible like pandemic like meme that isn't an abstract quantity?
I don't know. I think you could be really neoliberalism. If you really want to be a neoliberal, I would say the next meme would be machiavellianism, because ultimately, if you want to, let's just take neoliberalism at face value. I'm going to be pro neoliberal.
Right.
That means I'm pro top down. That means I'm contra anybody's sort of interest but my immediate company based monetary interest. And it's a different game. But there is a game to be had, which is you suck up to your boss, you treat them like their word is from a divine right of a king. That's where it reproduces feudalism. But let's go to the end here, and like, how would you play the game of neoliberalism, which is you basically you do what they say and you obey them. Period. Their mandate is the ultimate immanent morality, and you just go with that, and you try to accumulate power and capital.
Right.
I think that process, it might sound initially kind of like invigorating. But I think ultimately it will create social relationships that might be less enjoyable. I think you might find yourself in a place where you don't really have anything to say.
Right. So
to
like
people.
Yeah, because so machiavellianism, everyone is seen as a middleman, basically.
Yeah, the constant middleman.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to be a neoliberal, like a Fukuyamaist, like a real Fukuyamaist. I think it's a different sort of life, but you could do it. And I think you really have to take the Marxist critique seriously that they're reproducing feudalism, and you have to reverse that in terms of, yes, I'm reproducing feudalism, period.
Right.
The way we do this is we go into low-income neighborhoods with cash. It will not change the structure of top-down. So it's clean in that it's the current system. It's not contra the current system. It might be contra the workers who have issues, and it might even liberate some workers in that they had a problem, and then through the clean jouissance of neoliberalism, they're lifted from their previous spooks, right?
Right.
But But ultimately, if the boss who has the key card is still exploiting you in the same sort of way, you know, I I don't know. The things that I've gotten through the unionization effort myself is definitely worth more to me than having to continue to pay fealty to neoliberalism than I would have otherwise.
Right.
I think the effort of horizontalism and worker-based horizontalism, where you actually identify as somebody who wants to help fellow workers via their pay raise, like, you know, because of, you could even say, because I did this, people that have been working in community mental health and they're pissed off that they're like case manager 1 for 10 years and they're pushing 50. You know, the CEOs come in and they have to talk to everyone. They try to appease it, so they give everyone a raise. They're like, I'm pissed that you're keeping me under $20 an hour. I'm like 50 years old, and then it gets like, it gets fixed. Shit, like you can do that. You can be the person who brings that to this person. You're really fighting for workers if you're not a neoliberal, and I find that satisfying.
Right.
I find, yeah.
Like,
you could say
personally.
it's self-aggrandizing, pat myself on it. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, so is neoliberalism to a certain extent. Yeah, I like the leftist line more than the neoliberal line, or the right-wing line, or the fascist. Like I said, give everyone a blank check and see what, you know, and then convince them with their blank check that moralism is wrong. I like the ancient science of brocialism. That's what I really consider myself. I'm really am a brocialist. I really am a shitlord, honestly.
Wow. I think I'm still admin.
Socialism.
I think I'm still admin of that minarchist brocialist group from like decades ago, whatever it fucking feels like the way. It's still running. There's still some fucking cave trolls in there. Nice. Fucking yeah. Shit. I think someone just made me moderator without even asking me. Maybe I would. Yeah, I guess I was a really good brocialist back then.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But I think there's something true about quote unquote brocialism in terms of it's the anti-stoic. So you're allowing for this sort of room for fucking up, essentially.
Yeah.
And you're ultimately sort of paying heed to that. There is this sort of policy thing that's more important than these, you know, the minutia of discourse.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
So do you ever feel like it's just never gonna be enough, man?
All the time. All the time, bro. But I'm doing pretty good, I'll tell you that. I would say my personal life, like compared to like before philosophy, definitely like I would say the failing I'm doing now is much better than the failing I was.
Fuck, man. Just as you said that, Siri started speaking. So maybe she didn't like that. Fuck. Oh, man.
Hey, Siri.
No.
Did that work?
I am wearing headphones also, so...
it didn't do it. I just pranked myself then.
Shit. Fuck.
Anyway.
I have so many thoughts to formulate inside my head, so I don't know what else to say. I really like the idea of kind of subverting individualism towards a more, I don't know, I like how you formulated the whole like Epicureanism thing in terms of like personal praxis. In terms
but I don't think I'm subverting individualism. I'm sublating it. I want to subvert individualism as the capitalist idea, which Zizek says.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, and Zizek's even come on board, actually. He said Zizek is fully on board with my idea of egoism, even if he didn't say, I'm fully on board with Eliot Rosenstock. He did say people have shown that, you know, the leftist project isn't contradictory to evil, and the way he then says is people are basically evil, and you need to put them in a good system, essentially.
Right.
Egotistical, evil, power hungry, stuff like that. I wouldn't say that about people, because I think people's most important quality is that they tend towards the best, what they want, or at least I think I like when people sort of have access to a higher utilitarian sort of existence in general.
Right.
And I think that's what I do for most of my patients in the end, which is like, oh, they're here, they come, you know, they have this problem, and then they have a problem, but ultimately they leave, and they're better at sort of, they have a sort of more qualitative existence in a utilitarian sense.
Right.
Yeah, I always make sure that's sort of the goal, really. And I think that's not really the goal of most therapists, which is like to give them an ideology. I'm very like, you should see, speaking of sophistry, I am definitely a sophist when I'm a therapist. I'm the biggest fucking sophist because you have to be, because I can't bring my viewpoints in because they're so fucking off the wall. Like you're talking you're talking to someone who hasn't ever been outside a 5 mile radius, who has free insurance, and they're just like, and I'm talking about egoism and Epicureanism. I can't. Ultimately, it's like, you know, people who take God, like, I'm not saying this but it's just like, you have to be a sophist, or you can even say a Kantian, and go with their arguments, and you don't really, and you sort of work with them, and you sort of chip away with whatever you think is the proper, will dialectically give them the proper movement away. So right. I'm just like, so I'm really just, if you heard me speak as a therapist, I think you would hear somebody who's much more, I'm so contained. I have such fidelity to the profession, I would say, in terms of providing good therapy, right? That it makes me a total sophist when I'm doing it.
That's kind of my procedure. That's kind of my procedure on Facebook specifically. I think that's the reason why I haven't gotten zucked yet, ever. It's because it's just like I really don't like see a point in like it's like in groups that I have, you know, no kind of familiarity with. I really don't see a point in like adhering to my own like standards there, because they are having a completely different discourse, and if I just come in there with my fucking crazy bullshit, then it's gonna fucking do nothing. So might as well have a fucking like conversation with them.
Yeah, well, see, I'm the opposite, which is that's my like space, because I'm so contained, and like when it comes to those groups, I'll post all sorts of shit. I don't give a fuck. Right. Facebook, I get banned from a lot of this.
Right.
Although not so much anymore, especially when I was younger. I think I was also more like vicious with the rhetoric as well when I was younger. I'm less so now. At least I think I'm not really. I think I'm more effective. I think its cover is less vicious, but it's just more effective now, honestly.
Well, we're hitting the 1 hour mark. So, Nestor, do you have any questions before we finish off?
No, I really don't think so.
All right, Eliot. I want to start a segment. Okay, I'm fucking taking a leap of faith here. Okay, I'm gonna start a segment. I want to ask you. I'm gonna ask everybody who fucking comes on this podcast at the end. I want you to imagine like a future that isn't undead.
That isn't undead.
Yeah.
Oh no, my future is undead.
Is that your future?
No, I mean, I think luxury communism is possible. I'm interested once the state fuses with your phone apps,
right?
To a more significant sense, or people become more familiar with them. Like, I think to a certain extent it's starting, but I really think the potential for the smartphone to recapture various mechanisms, I think there's potential there, and I think the critique of it will be that it's undead, and that it's not luxury communism. I think people who have a sense of self and a sense of how to navigate outside of that, and how to sort of accelerate the things which initially come to them as curses into blessings. Right. That's my non-undead future. A highly egoistic but not necessarily Machiavellian future.
Right.
Yeah. A
Well, I love that.
utilitarianly Epicurean future. That's Epicurus still survives. We're still circling the discourse. So whatever, I think Epicurus will live into space. He will.
Space garden, like Epicurean gardens. That would be
Yeah,
sick.
exactly.
Actually, that sounds like a
Epicurean
fucking sick.
space garden. Yeah, there you go. There it is. There it
Fuck
is.
yeah.
Is Epicurean gardens like the better alternative to like Epicurean space gardens to fully automated luxury based communism?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that we're bored by gardens, so we have to. Our garden is the multiplicity of signifiers and structures and means of production. So that's our Epicurean garden. We'll just keep making it grow. We're just watering it. We're watering it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's just, I always try to, I don't know why even, it's not like, I'm majorly in favor of that, but for some reason I always end up trying to bring up fully automated luxury based communism.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we did the sex work episode, like the whole kind of axis of the episode was like, how do you move towards like how does sex work look like in fully automated luxury based communist society,
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it could be different. I honestly think it'll probably be similar to how it is now. I don't think these really hot button issues change very much necessarily. I think people tend to be more forgiving. Like it'll move towards legalization and sort of security of the people who are working in that industry. But I think with sex work, I think people underestimate the significance of sex trafficking in sex work. So I think that's what you're going to run into, which is that there is sex work that is voluntary, and then there's sex work that's sex trafficking, and it's hard to reckon those two things. So I think that's where the discourse is sort of failing, or the traditional leftist discourse. So I don't know where it's going to end up personally.
Yeah, no. I mean, like that wasn't. It wasn't. The point wasn't not for you to like just answer that question. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's I don't know, but I can give you another contradiction that I think still has to be worked out.
All right.
I'd be interested in I think the proper way to do this, you could create a pro sex work, anti-sex trafficking group. I think that's the way to dialectically move to the next stage of the sex work discourse, which is you would have to get people that are very pro sex work fighting sex trafficking. I think that's what's, as soon as that happens, then I'll say we have dialectically progressed. But I think by the nature of the work, it seems unlikely, quite frankly. Sorry.
Yeah, it's. I mean, like, it's not like anyone.
I think maybe Laura could start that. Misha Mayfair, who's
she was one of the guests on the episode actually.
So I would say she could start it. I literally don't see one other person that could start that.
I think she could. Yeah. she has that vibe about her. Yeah. Well, anyway, what a wonderful episode. So your living future is Epicurean space gardens.
Yeah, but the space garden of crypto keys.
Crypto keys.
Truth mechanism, interlocking symbolic orders. The garden is ideal. It's with language, it's with access, and it's with power access to power. I think that's sort of my big thing that I don't see anybody really talking about. I would say is what is the key to get power? And I would say there's often you can look at it like a game, and there really is a solid ideal. It's an ideal, but it's rational and functional to get power. I think the Epicurean garden will be power based off of. It has to be sound, but you can't. I don't think you can be a petty reactionary because all your power will look like shit to yourself. I think it'll always be angry.
Yeah.
So anarcho-accelerationism, ipso facto anarcho-accelerationism.
Well, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us Elliot,
Thank you guys.
that was
Good
a
talk.
wonderful episode. Great talk.
Yeah,
Thanks,
great.
thanks, Nestor, for being with us.
Oh, of course, of course.
Thank you, me, for being here too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. Join us next time on the PAMU podcast.
All right. Peace out.
Peace out.
All right.